Okay, let's jump right into this explainer, where we're going to unpack a 200-year-old riddle of treasure, traps, and outright tragedy. All of this is hidden on a tiny, teardrop-shaped island off the coast of Nova Scotia, Canada. Now, if you were just a passing sailor, Oak Island would look totally unremarkable to you. Just a patch of trees and stone out there in the freezing salt spray of the North Atlantic. But just beneath the dirt, there's a silent guardian of secrets, an absolutely mind-boggling labyrinth of engineering, and a legendary money pit that has quite literally devoured fortunes for centuries.
But before we even get into the crazy engineering hidden down there, we need to talk about the chilling legend that hangs over this entire island. Because this isn't just a story about a deep hole in the ground, it's a really grim warning about an obsession that has consumed so many lives. A lot of people call this site a pirate's vault, sure, but for those who have actually dug in that freezing mud, they know it simply as a pit of death. The atmosphere of dread there is very real, and as you'll see, the island definitely has a way of making people pay a massive price for their curiosity.
All right, let's look at part 1, the discovery of the pit.
So, the whole thing kicks off innocently enough back in 1795. 3 teenage boys, fueled by local ghost stories and a serious thirst for adventure, stumble across this weird, unnatural depression in the ground. It was right under this ancient oak tree, and get this, the tree had deep, heavy pulley marks completely scarred into its branches. I mean, talk about a classic treasure hunt setup, right? But that teenage curiosity escalated super fast. Fast forward just a bit to 1804, and you've got organized crews with real investors and heavy labor digging deep into the earth. And they were completely unaware that they were stepping into a masterfully designed trap that would trigger over 2 centuries of obsession.
Which brings us to part 2, engineering an impossible trap.
Because this was definitely not just some random hole in the dirt. As they dug, the workers discovered this highly calculated rhythmic architecture that we now call the 10-foot rule. Basically, every 10 feet down, bam, they hit a deliberate barrier. They were shoveling through heavy wet earth, then they'd hit solid oak log platforms, then thick layers of stone, and most surprisingly, they found this strange blue clay packed in everywhere. It turns out this clay was acting as a highly effective waterproof structural sealant. So the big takeaway here is that this was a heavily reinforced shaft engineered specifically to withstand the crushing weight of the earth for centuries.
And honestly, it gets even weirder when you look at the actual materials they were pulling up from the freezing Canadian dirt. Deep inside the structure, they found layers of charcoal, seaweed, and, wait for it, tropical coconut fibers. Finding coconut fibers buried deep in Nova Scotia is just mind-boggling. It strongly points to an architect who had incredible foresight and true global reach, using these exotic materials to build massive filtration mats deep underground. By 1804, this whole excavation totally morphed from a treasure hunt into an all-out war with the island. The diggers initially thought, oh, we're just battling natural groundwater seeping into the hole. But the reality was far more sinister. Down at roughly 90 feet, they essentially tripped an invisible wire. They triggered a hidden guardian, and the Atlantic Ocean itself violently flooded the shaft. This was absolutely no leak, guys. This was a highly sophisticated hydraulic booby trap purposefully designed to protect whatever is sitting at the bottom.
And just to prove this wasn't some natural spring, later researchers investigated the nearby beach at Smith's Cove. They found 5 hidden finger drains, expertly packed with rocks and those coconut fibers we talked about, acting as a massive filtration system that fed seawater right into a main flood tunnel. To test it, researchers actually poured bright dye straight into the money pit and watched it seep right back out through the island's coastline. That proved, without a doubt, that the entire island was a massive, interconnected hydraulic machine designed to drown intruders. I mean, just think about the sheer genius it takes to literally weaponize the ocean centuries before modern technology.
Let's move to part 3, strange clues from below. As new teams kept arriving over the decades, fighting the freezing, dark water, they uncovered artifacts that totally shifted the narrative. Deep down in that shaft, they hit a heavy stone block etched with these bizarre, alien-looking symbols. Of course, the optimists claimed it was a cipher that translated to 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. But others, they looked at those markings and saw a grim, terrifying warning to turn back. Adding to the whole mystery, the stone itself eventually vanished into thin air, leaving us with only sketches and a legacy of intense historical debate.
The confusion around what's actually down there really peaked between 1896 and 1897. Iron drill bits were pulling up that weird blue clay, and suddenly they brought up a tiny, curled fragment of parchment, along with traces of metal. Now, how on earth does a delicate little scrap of parchment survive at those incredible depths? That one single fragment completely changed the game. It made everyone wonder, hey, maybe this pit isn't guarding piles of gold coins at all. Maybe it's protecting lost historical documents, secret manuscripts, or even the archives of a lost society.
Okay, let's transition to part 4, the deadly cost of obsession. Because eventually, the island began to demand a devastating physical and psychological toll. The true, terrifying danger of the pit became horrifyingly clear in 1861. During an intense excavation attempt, a steam-powered pump engine suddenly exploded with a sharp, metallic snap, and it claimed a worker's life. This tragic accident completely shattered the illusion of a fun adventure. It turned the hunt into a fatal tragedy, marking the very first time the island demanded a human life in exchange for its secrets. And actually, the psychological blow of that 1861 expedition hurt just as much as the physical danger. During that exact same doomed operation, the heavy, wet clay suddenly shifted beneath the searchers' feet. Those intricate oak log platforms, literally the heart of the pit's structure, violently collapsed inward. The pit essentially swallowed the supposed treasure and everything else inside the shaft, bearing it even further into the impenetrable dark abyss. You can imagine how the psychological weight of all these failures completely shifted the mood of the workers. The thrill of the chase, the greed for gold, that entirely evaporated. In its place came this heavy, grim foreboding. The men realized they weren't just fighting water, dirt, and wood anymore. They were suddenly gripped by the very real dread that they were fighting a dark, ancient curse. And tragically, that intense dread was validated in 1897. A worker named Maynard Kaiser fell to his death during a drilling operation. Becoming the second victim of the money pit, his death heavily reinforced that terrifying legend of the Seven among the crews. It spread the dark rumor that the island was alive and that it would actively defend itself until its blood price was fully paid. So, this brings us to part 5. Who built the money pit?
When we look at all this complex hydraulic engineering combined with such a deeply tragic history, we really have to ask, who out there actually possessed the resources and the knowledge to build this impenetrable fortress prior to 1795? We're basically left with 3 main, heavily debated theories. First, was it a massive pirate vault, maybe hiding the legendary loot of Captain Kidd or the lost gold of the Spanish Main? Second, could it be a military cache, holding state secrets or the treasury of a fallen French empire? Or third, and this is a big one given that piece of parchment, was it a secret society hiding invaluable religious artifacts or Masonic manuscripts from the rest of the world?
Today, Oak Island is essentially a landscape of scars. It's a graveyard of failed excavations, broken dreams, and modern boreholes. The epic struggle between human persistence and the pit's brilliant engineering is still happening right now. And as the Atlantic Ocean continues to pulse through those hidden tunnels today, just exactly like it did 200 years ago, we want to leave you with this thought. Is any treasure, any lost historical document, or any secret truly worth this terrifying level of human sacrifice and obsession?